Mic check, 1 2.
Yes, sir. You loud?
All right, just had to switch my headset. We was waiting on people.
You're not never working. I miss her.
Yeah, you can't.
Everybody doing good so far today?
Yes, sir. No problems at all.
And just sitting here finishing this letter. Hey there, Cop Indio. How's it going?
All right, how's everybody doing?
Doing great, sir. Good to hear your voice.
Likewise, I had an extremely busy week at work this week, but I'm just good to be able to get out of there and get back to what I know.
Look at this. Look at this trailer park mess. All the police, they fucking up the neighborhood. Look at them. Look.
Hey, you is a
They
snitch.
fucking up the neighborhood.
Mind your business.
Every last one of them. Look. Fucking up the neighborhood.
Mind your business.
I'm doing what they do.
Chad Patty. Who is they?
White folks.
Thank God.
They fucking up the neighborhood. Hold on. Look at him. He got more hips and ass than a black one. Look at him. Yeah, it's on my nerves. Look at him. Look.
Shut up,
They
bro.
fucking up the neighborhood. Look at him.
Hey, what's your dog, bro?
On his neck and face. Somebody need to do something about it. I paid $7. I don't need it. I don't need it. I paid $7.20 a month. Look at this.
Everybody still there?
Y'all wasn't gonna tell me I was off on mute. And
Yeah, I'm still here.
Y'all heard me?
Oh man. Yeah, I'm here though.
I asked them if they heard me.
Yeah, I'm more than sure they heard.
For real?
Yes.
They didn't say they heard me.
So James, you said you liked the show earlier, or this Rising show?
Yes, sir. That was on point. Yeah. Y'all walked it all the way through. So we'll leave anyone with any doubts or any misconceived notions or any of that.
That's the thing. Is like the more and more I'm digging up and reading, like that's all that happened. Tribes sold other tribes out and sold each other out. Then somebody sold them out.
Yep, and that's all it was in a nutshell. But like I said, you have those that want to romanticize everything that we did and not talk about, you know, the negative side. It just, they want to stick with, oh man, this is, you know, they did this to us, but it's like, okay, well, how did they do this to us? Especially, you can't say in the same tongue that we taught them government, and then you turn around and you say, well, it's their government. So I'm like, you can't have it both ways. You just can't do it. So either they came with their own government, which we know they didn't, or we taught them government and we got beside ourselves and we failed, which is exactly what happened.
Because I was reading Lincoln's Gettysburg Address earlier, and re-looking back at it, I'm like, wow, now that I break it down. And the question when I read it, I'd be like, if you read it, you have to ask yourself, who is he talking to? Who is he talking to and who he really talking about? 7 years ago.
Yep, y'all forgive me. I'm out here getting gas, but yeah, that's the point of where I'm getting at is saying who was the audience and who was he referring to with all this that was going on. Who was he referring to?
Yeah, when you're sitting there saying that if they don't get their government, they'll never be free, and they'll always be the oppressed. I'm like, hold on now. He ain't talking about no Negroes in his Gettysburg Address. He's not even talking about Negro slavery.
Nope, not at all.
Especially when you read his memoirs where he let it be known he did not care to free so-called Negro slaves. And the next phase of history I was studying the parallels of the 17th and 1800 American history with Spanish history, British history, and French history, and it's very interesting. Well, you come to find out in the 1700s, Australia was a penal colony. That they took criminals from Britain, Spain, France. You can even probably throw America in there. Well, this is before America. Criminals got sent off to Australia.
Yep, and that's the same thing they did when they came and took over Georgia. Georgia, the whole state of what we know as Georgia, was actually a fort, and they used criminals and said, "Hey, you come to Georgia instead of shipping you to Australia, and we'll give you land over in the New World." And that's what I keep trying to tell people over and over. I'm like, they didn't take over like y'all think that they did, like a swarm. It was us. Like you said earlier, it was us pitted against us. Because you think about. Go ahead. I was just going to say that when you look at all these wars that took place, you know, King Philip's War, French Indian War, King William's War.
Yeah, because now I'm trying to find
all these different wars.
Yeah, no, all I was finna say is I was trying to find documents before the 1800s that mention a Cherokee Federation, and I haven't had any luck yet. The first thing I see of it mentioned is when it comes into the 1800s, when a couple of bands got squished together and formed Cherokee.
And that's the deal. You won't.
And I kind of had that feeling. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't me because I was reading the timeline. It seemed like there's certain tribes of Indians, because I understand the Confederate is war, and I could be wrong on this, but from my understanding, confederations, they form when they're at war. When they no longer at war, they disband. So when they disband, they no longer use that name. Then particular other tribes can band together for a certain cause and they take on another name to identify all of them as one. So depending on what time in history you're looking at, depending on what name you'll find particular groups of people up under.
Right, and that's why you see all the different name changes of the same people. You have those that, oh, they can't be the same people. I'm like, yeah, they are the same people. The people never left that land. They were just given new names based upon the Confederation. And a lot of them, you see, they actually will combine names. Like, for example, you have Coosa. And then as they started going west there, Coushatta. Because they blended in and formed that confederation with the Choctaw, which we know as the Washita, the Wichita, the you know, all of them, Chickasaw, all of them the same one, like you all was saying, all of them that speak the Muskogee language, they're all the same people.
All the same. Yeah. I kind of figured that if they all speak Muskogee, then they have to be all the same, and time and history gave them different names. Depending on what nation in history they made deals with and what side. Because it seemed like the majority of the major tribes split to a half fought with one nation and another half fought with another nation.
Yep, and that's exactly what happened. Like, for example, with the Choctaw was all one. The Chickasaw and the Choctaw were all one there in Alabama and Mississippi and the eastern part of Louisiana. All the same people. And when the war started going on between the Spanish, the French, and the British, then you had the Choctaw sided with the Spanish. So you even find a lot of Spanish names that were given to these chiefs and elders of these tribes. Like, for example, you know, my great granddad going back 5 times, he's listed in the papers as John. But when we actually find the paperwork, the documents from the Catholic Church, he's listed as Juan. So we know that Juan is the Spanish derivative of John. Same person, did the same thing, but you know, and so we had those that started. So depending, and like y'all were breaking down before, whatever group that was there, because the French, what we know as the French, but they're Cajuns, which are your Vikings, all your Gothic people, but your Dutch, all of them, all a part of that same group. That they had been there, that they had gone down into Mesoamerica and got kicked out. And this was, you know, thousands of years ago. This wasn't like yesterday. And so they were kicked out and forced back into the land that we know today as Canada, and they came back down and just settled along the Mississippi, which is why you find so many French names and French settlements all along the Mississippi, and what you all broke down earlier, dealing with New York and what we know as Canada today. All the divisions were all of them just swapping land because they were fighting each other and making alliances, and our people were stuck in the middle. And it depends on whichever side you were with, whoever you like, that's who you were with. And you think about, I'm going to be quiet. Think about all of the numbers that they said, all these casualties during the Civil War. Europeans wasn't over here like that to cause all those casualties. They didn't start coming over here until the 1900s. They didn't start coming over here until then. We're dealing with the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. That's when they started coming by the thousands, by the boatload. Yep. They wasn't over here like that during the Civil War.
And I found
so it couldn't have been them dying.
I found the receipt that proved it. Is that during this time in the 1800s, they were fighting Britain and France in the Sea War. And the problem was anybody that was caught out there in the water, Britain forced them into the Navy. They stopped for 30 years of traveling. Wasn't nobody going back and forth because Britain was making everybody join their Navy.
Yep, and paying the tariff, paying the tax.
Yep.
which is why when you all were breaking down all of these wars and my people are trying to, but I put it in other back chats, but I know it's like a gazillion back chats now, showing the documentation that these were my ancestors that fought in these wars that were classified as scouts and all this stuff. But these were my people. Like, why are my people all the way up in Ohio and owning land after having fought during the French and Indian War? Why were they part of the Connecticut Minutemen or militia during the French and Indian War? Why are my people all the way up there? Like I said, it gets back to whatever side they decided to be on. And it was our people that was literally caught in the middle because we tried to one up each other and we got caught. We got. That's all it was. Game recognized game, and they ran game on us after we started, turning on each other. I yield the mic.
And it gets crazier when you realize at the same time that they fighting Indians over here, that they couldn't send no soldiers over here because they was fighting wars in their own homeland.
Yep, because the British, the Scots, and the Irish, that triangular war was going on, and that was still going on up and even came over to this place. If anyone looked at the gangs of New York, remember those were all of the battles between all of those that were from what we know today as Great Britain, but you had the Scots, the Irish, the Welsh, all of them were fighting each other. So they couldn't have said there's no way in the world they could send troops over here like that and to fight. And then you still have to look at the Boston Tea Party when they said that they dressed up as Indians to dump the tea. They were in blackface. It was us. That's what they were doing, mimicking us. Even with the stupid song, This Old Man, he played one, played Knick-Knack on My Thumb with a knick-knack paddywhack. That knick-knack is Mic-Mac. This old man came rolling home. That's the Mic-Mac. That's the Bannocky. Bannock Spring. Bannock. Bannocky. You'll find them all still in that same area. They don't want to tell us the truth, but it is what it is. We played a role in all of that, and we have to pay for it. I yield the mic.
Because there's a very important person they keep forgetting. At this time, they were supposed to be coming over here. Is history gonna forget about Napoleon was kicking they behind? And then I found the article of the first expedition through Africa, which didn't happen until the mid 1800s.
Exactly.
And I'm like, if the British is fighting the Zulu in Africa and they losing, people got to remember, the British lost the war against the Zulus. So who did they take from Africa again?
Exactly my point. They were losing the war. They were losing the war in Africa. They were losing the war in the Caribbean because we still, get back to Haiti. They were losing the wars. They would spread like mustard. There's no way in the world they could have done all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. It was spread way too thin. It's when they stopped fighting amongst each other and started working together, then
And one thing that majority of us have never factored in, they didn't have semi-automatic machine guns. They would fire one round from their musket, and it took them close to a minute to reload. So, and then running out of ammo, because you can read all the documents about the Revolutionary War about how soldiers were running out of ammo.
Yeah, they were melting down silverware. They was taking silverware from people's homes and turning it into ammo during a battle.
Yes, sir. So they wouldn't, they were, oh, they were gunning all this and doing all that. No, they were not. They were not. They were not. They couldn't. They didn't have the weapons like that. It wasn't in mass production like that. So I'm like, the time it took to reload a musket, the time it took to reload a cannon, you tell me the people didn't know, living in that land didn't know the territory and couldn't sit on high and know what was going on? I'm like, come on, man.
Mm-hmm. Because the rifle as we know it today didn't exist until Germany invaded Russia.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because dumb farmers are the one that invented the modern day rifle.
See, we leave all of that out and just like, oh yeah, they were just gunning us down and they tell us stories like, oh, they gave everybody smallpox and all that. I'm like, come on, man. Like, why do you think that they didn't want us to read the book? Why was it illegal for us to read the book?
And I want to know who was coming from up in them northern parts at the same time when the potato famine was going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They forget it was the Choctaw that was sending the Irish potato.
Mm-hmm.
They were over there starving. Yeah, but yeah, we leave so many important parts of history out. But y'all were breaking down the timeline that it's just irrefutable. No one can sit here and say, "Oh man, well they did this and they did that." It's like, no, no. Y'all broke it down, and like I say, you're gonna make some people mad because they still gonna be like, "Oh man, they did this and that to us. They did this and they did that." And I'm like, okay, well, how did they do all this? How did they do all of that? Without us assisting, because we were here in mind. There's no way in the world they could have done all that to us. Impossible.
When I read there was 614 nations alone in Canada, I started doing the math. I'm like, them people couldn't have made nobody did nothing.
Mm-hmm. That's the crazy part. I'm like, how they forcing people to do all of this stuff that they claiming that is being done to us, and I'm like, no, how are they doing it? And they don't even know the land, because you look at everything that took place in the landscape that they didn't even get to, the west of the Mississippi until the 1830s. Until after the Treaty of the Dancing Rabbit. So they weren't out west. They weren't doing anything down south, because we still got I don't know if y'all gonna touch on the Red Stick Wars. Yeah. So we were still fighting them in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi during the Red Stick Wars. So I'm like,
I found where the Trail of Tears actually starts. It's not in the South. I was studying the timeline. The Trail of Tears and Underground Railroad and the railroad construction is in the same timeline of the same year. And they follow the same direction coming out of Indiana, going into Illinois, going out west. It started and stopped at the same time of the Trail of Tears and all. Because the Trail of Tears that they show you on the whatchamacallit, I did some research. That's a tourist attraction that people get to walk and you get to camp around and this and that. Is not the actual site of it.
Exactly.
Because that made me think when we read last week that our ancestors wasn't letting whites buy no land, do anything in the South. And then when you read in the 1800s, 1830s, we still kicking their ass in the South. So like, so how can these people be marching anywhere right now through this area? You got the Red Stick Wars going on, so-called Civil War. Who marching across from the South? Not to mention they still fighting out there in Texas.
Yep, and we're still fighting up until the 1900s in Texas. Yeah, you're right. Like I said, it came from the north, went west, and they came down. And one of the spots they went to was Fort Smith, Arkansas. But these were not the tribes from the south. These were the tribes from the north. Mm-hmm. These were your northern tribes that you know today, all up in that area, and the so-called Northern Sioux and all the rest of them out of Ohio that they were running out. So they were cutting across from Ohio and going west, and they're cutting down, and they sent them into Fort Smith, Arkansas. So yeah, like I say, that didn't start. The movement going west from those in the south didn't start until my people, the Choctaw, sold out, and like you all were talking about earlier, that they appointed chiefs. None of our chiefs, they appointed chiefs. Like I said, my great granddad was a warrior chief, and they killed him because he wouldn't sign it. And then had a tribunal saying like, oh, he died from the drink. He drowned from the water that was in his alcoholic beverage. I'm like, come on, man. Who drowned from drinking? I'm like, no, but that's what they officially said because they wanted to sign the treaty and he didn't want to do it. And that's why my people ended up going into Louisiana, connecting with my other people that was there and around the St. Mary's area, because they didn't want to sign, because they knew if they signed, being a quote unquote citizen was going to make you a slave. They knew that. So they were like, no, I'm not signing because I'd rather die a free man. I'm not signing. So his own people had him killed. It wasn't them that had him killed. His own people that had him killed because he didn't want to sign it. And that's why even to this day, the separation between Mississippi Choctaw, which is our people, and then the Choctaw that in Oklahoma that have been fighting, when y'all talked about what happened in 1978, and that's what the difference is. You have some groups that are like, oh, we want to be recognized as freed, whatever. So I'm like, no, we were never freed with a D anything. We are Choctaw, period. And that's why they don't want to recognize the Mississippi Choctaw, because those that are in Choctaw today, those are your Melungeons, those are your Asians, those are Europeans, all those that were appointed.
Your real slaves.
Yes, sir.
The ones that got free. Because when I studied the Treaty of 1866, I can be wrong on this, but when I read the language, I kind of put it in context of the time when they're speaking. So I'm like, they're not talking to us in that treaty. When they say the slaves should have the same rights as the Indians, they talking about the Europeans and the people that we took in as slaves.
Yes, sir. And that's where it gets back again. It's those Irish, people that came over, all of those that came over here that they trying to softly label indentured servants. But that was not the case. And that's why I say that goes back even as far as the Salem witch trial. Because again, they were literally giving their women to us. Because their women, like I said, they had no rights. They were considered property. They were slaves. That's why you go back again and you study the Melungeon, and they'll tell you the men, the indigenous men that were here are their forefathers, and they were never, ever slaves. It was the women, the European women, that were the slaves. And that's where the Melungeons came from, when you get your hillbillies today. But they tell you they don't have one drop from their fathers, their forefathers, of being slaves. So these are the things that you don't hear them really talk about Melungeon in this whole discussion. Well, how did this whole breed come about? If it was so called, and they can't keep sitting there and saying, oh, well, the Europeans were raping our women. No. They were given the European women were being treated better by us than they were by the European men that enslaved them and brought them over here.
And 3 days ago, doing some reading, came across a very old article. I wonder would people be shocked to know that Harriet Tubman, when she came along the Underground Railroad, it was towards the last 15 years of it. That the actual start was back in the 1700s. And by the time that she got a part of it, it was already running for 50-something plus years. And the question that I asked at this time was, the North was bad for Indian to go because the British already been up there for 100 years, and the tribes up there that were going to stay already made their deals with the Europeans. So everybody else was in the South. Why would an Indian want to go north to where the Europeans was?
Exactly.
And it's just a question. No, as you were saying?
No, because I was saying, because even at that time, Mexico was still Mexico or New Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you go through all of those Europeans to get to Canada, especially those in the South? It doesn't even make sense. Like I said, the narrative that they're trying to give us, it's not logical. It's like if you know your people were from Mesoamerica, because again they keep tracing back and say, oh, all these were Olmec. These are Olmec finders here in Georgia. Olmec finding in Florida. Olmec. I said, we were all the same people. And I told them, I said, any so-called that call themselves a Mexican today, I said, show me a Mexican that looks like those on the murals in the temples. Show me any that look like that. And I said, and then I'll be quiet. You can't find them. They all look like us. So why would we go up into Canada when down south we're right back across the Gulf? It doesn't even make sense. Mm-hmm. And then you had those of us that were sailors and seamen. Mm-hmm. All have been doing this time, even so-called doing all this slavery time. I'm like, why are we? Because like I say, I have documentation, and I'll share with y'all a little bit later when I get out of this meeting, is showing that, one of my great uncles were more than one. They were all seamen. Why are they seamen down in Louisiana? Why are they gonna get these so-called slaves boats and ferrymen to take people across one part of the Mississippi to the other? Why are they giving them boats? It's not logical.
And another thing I come to find across that a lot of people don't know about history, that in the mid-1800s, a steamboat made it from Europe, from the coast of Spain to North America. Was the first steamboat across the open sea. So then I started looking at seafaring at that time. Excuse me. And came to find out that there were major naval battles going on all through the 1800s. So who was transporting people through the Atlantic Ocean if France is in a naval battle with Spain and Britain in a naval battle with the Netherlands?
Yep, and then you still had the Pirates of the Caribbean, which was the Caribou, which was us, that was controlling all of the Caribbean. So it's like, again, where was all this just going across the waters and grabbing millions of people and all that stuff? I'm like, where did all that come from? How were they able to do that? And they were all fighting each other, and we're fighting them on the seas, and still get back to the Issa people. That's what I was sharing with Brother TMA earlier and Lady Free a few days ago. I was talking about, well, longer than that, now it's been a couple of months. And I was sharing about the Issa tribes that control it. They were the ones that were sending the plates over into like I say, up in the lost my train of thought. But the Vikings and the Minoans, which became the Greeks, all with the Turks, and giving them the Turkish wheat that we know today as corn or maize, all of that was the Issa tribe that controlled the waters, that controlled the sea. So I'm still trying to figure out where they get all this stuff from. All of a sudden, they came out of nowhere and they running things, and I'm like, but we just sat back and let it happen. Come on. I'm like, any logical person would know we played a role in that. We had parts to play in that. I yield the mic.
Yeah, because also come to learn that the distance between so-called Russia and America at its shortest distance is 2.4 miles.
Yep, not far at all.
So I'm like, being that close, why couldn't people actually trade? When you find out Greenland sits in the middle of the Atlantic, and it's only, I think it's like 1,000 something miles is the halfway point where you'll get to Greenland.
Yeah, that's why I say all we need is a to scale map and these timelines and see how all this stuff is overlapping and saying, okay, well, this what they saying is not possible. So now we have to go back and look at the timeline, look at these maps, look at the people that were involved, and then we can start having a serious, truthful discussion.
Yeah, because the next question is, when you start studying the wars and the different allies of different Indian tribes, you come to find out there's leftover nations of Genghis Khan that's allies with American Indian tribes.
Yes, sir. That's where you're getting into those plain Indians that we talk about. Oh, well, who are they and where did they come from? That was the people.
Yeah, they came over. Yeah, to trying to remember, I don't want to misquote it. Through his brother lineage. And then when you look at documents looking back, that there were colonies from different nations back in the 13 and 1400s here amongst Indians.
Yep, that's what I said. So we gotta really look at those Cajuns and not just narrow them down to Louisiana, but those Cajuns are the Acadians that like I say, well, your Vikings, your Germans, your Swedish, your Finns, all of them, your northern part of France. Like I say, your northern part of France and your southern part of France are two different people. Your northern part of France, those were your Cajuns, which like I say, all your Vikings, all your Gothic people, and some of the Germans, those German folks that we claim to be German, but all of them, like I say, dealing with your Dutch and all of them with the wooden shoes. Those are your Cajuns.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your Acadians.
Yep.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because and they hiding it in plain sight. Because I told you I was on YouTube looking at one of the watching one of the shows, and a commercial came up like in between videos, and it was talking about a guy that was this Cajun chef, and he was like, "Yeah, I traced my ancestry back to the Acadian in Nova Scotia." And it was they had it right there in a commercial. It was about food and stuff, right? But he basically laid that whole thing out about how they all migrated from Europe down, through Greenland and Iceland, right? And they got to what's now Nova Scotia, and a lot of those people, when they were sent out, when they were banished from that area, they ended up in France's colony down in the south, in what's now Louisiana.
Yes, sir. And that was part of that deal, that treaty that they did between the British and the French. And that's when they moved down, started moving down further south. They were always along the Louisiana, Louisiana, Mississippi River there, but they really started coming down after that particular treaty. And when they signed the treaty, they were like, okay, well, we take the land, and they started moving down south in droves. But that's why originally you have New Amsterdam, you have Newfoundland, or AKA Newfoundland. All of that was known as New York prior to it being New York. These were all of your Cajuns that were up there. That's why you see words like Algonquian. That's French. You see Iroquois. That's French. You see Sioux. That's French.
Yep.
Oh, that's French.
Yep, because they use a French spelling to describe.
I've been caught on to that. The Iroquois is French. That is not their original name. That's a French given name.
So long. So when you study the French and the fur trade, and you look at all the furs, and then you start studying all the furs and all of the so-called classic painting and all that stuff, and you see all these women and stuff with all these furs on over in Europe. But where they get the animal skins from? They got it from here, because those Cajuns were settled in amongst us, and that was part of their beaver trade, their bear trade. All of those skins, your buffalo hide. That's what they were doing, living amongst us.
You got to remember, Davy Crockett and all them were Frenchmen. Don't let history fool you.
Yeah, that's why he's got a coonskin cap.
Yep. Your fur trader were Frenchmen. That was their trade, their business. That's why to this day, fashion capital still coming out of France. When it comes to them fabrics, furs.
And to bring that full circle, look at New York. New Amsterdam, another fashion capital.
Yeah, because like you said, where were they first? They was in New York before the Brits got it.
Right.
That the French lost that war. That's what got them out of New York.
Yep. And when we keep, like I said, when we keep digging and digging, we start finding out. Like I said, those Cajuns have been over here. That's why they tell you they've been over here for a long time in the land all up in there known as New England and Canada today. Because when they came down initially, and this was a few thousand years ago, when they came here initially, we ran them out of Mesoamerica. We ran them out of the South. And so they had remnants along the Mississippi, which is why everywhere that you go, primarily down south, somewhere along the river, you're going to find a French name. You're going to find a French town, a French river, or a French spelling of a particular tribe of people or a town of people. But it's the French spelling. Even when you go to Louisiana, they spell Ouachita starting with the O-U. And people look at it like, I said, yeah. I said, it's pronounced Ouachita. Just like I said, when you look at it, I said the O and the U make the W sound. I said, don't let the smooth taste fool you. That's the French spelling of Ouachita.
People got to remember, 3 different cultures slammed down on what we know as Louisiana: Spanish, French, and then English.
Yep, your English were your Johnny come lately.
You see it in the culture in Louisiana to this day. You see the 3 different cultures.
I was gonna say you see them all overlapped on top of each other, and because I went with my wife down to New Orleans. It was 2013. We went down there, and we were looking at the buildings, and the oldest buildings were the Spanish ones. And you see the French come in. You know, the French influence is the dominant influence there, of course, but then all the English stuff is newer. I mean, you can see it just in the architecture and in the buildings that are there.
And the thing is how you know that these different sets of people came here, they left a reminder. Their religious structures.
Yep.
They lit it all over the landmass, the different churches that tie back to different cultures. Because you got the Gothic churches all through Minnesota, all going down through the Mississippi. Then at the same time, you got some Netherlands type churches all scattered in between there, some Dutch type religions all scattered in between there.
Yep, and the big cover up that we're going to discover is all the religious sites were built up on our sacred ground, our sacred temples. They didn't, say, oh, this is the spot where we're going to put this. They literally built on top of and used the stone that we use to build our temples to create their cathedral. That's all they did.
Because you figure if they built the government on top of the government that was here, you figure they built most of the towns and villages on top of the ones that was here. They absolutely built the religious sites on top of ones that was here as well.
And I'm glad you said that because it brings me back to this. I don't understand why people find it so hard to believe, but you can watch reality shows and television shows show you the underground cities of America. All through Philadelphia and New York, all over there on that northeast side, there's cities built on top of cities. And we ain't talking about small cities. We talk about major cities built on completely underground.
Yeah, all major metropolitan areas. Look at Jordan Peele's movie Us. They lead with that in the beginning of the movie, talking about networks of caves that sit under cities and stuff like that. What is he talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Who was the people down here? Why was the people that were leading what was going on down there? Why were they Aborigines?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? It's all out there in front of you. You just got to be able to put it together.
That's the key, is putting those pieces of the same thing that my folks did. You use the same digging tunnels to get out. And that's all you find down there. Cities on top of cities on top of cities on top of cities. So, brother, I'm about to run here to this count getting. Hope they shouldn't be long tonight. So I send a message when I'm out of here. Hopefully, I've looked at the agenda and I don't see anything on here that's real controversial tonight. So I should be in and out, probably be about a couple of hours from now.
Well, if anything, we'll be in the back chat.
All right, bro.
All right, y'all. Get with y'all then.
All right, appreciate it.
Yeah, bro. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, Carver, I feel like I've been on a reading binge lately.
Hey, it seemed like it brought some fruit, man. I'm kind of mad. I got stuck with the meeting stuff and ain't been able to talk to y'all.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing too is last Wednesday I think I might have mentioned this before, but last Wednesday I took my family down to where our folks are from, and we did some digging and a little bit of research and stuff, and I'm starting to put a little more together about like what we were talking about. I was talking to TMH the other night. Was it Saturday night? I think it was. And we were talking about the the oil lands that was Indian lands and how they swindled those people off of them once they found out that those reservations had oil underneath them. You know, I'm seeing, because we were talking about it. I was like, I'm seeing a connection between how they married into the tribes and eventually not only mixed those people up and acculturated them, but also got them through different legal tricks out of the land that they were on so they could take it over and use the resources.
Yeah, and the Choctaw did it to themselves. Because we read earlier how they sold half of their nation out for land. They made a deal with the government to go out west for land. Went out west, got land, found they had oil out there, and cut off the Choctaw that was left in Mississippi and Alabama.
Yeah, and you look at the stuff the Cherokee were involved in with eliminating a lot of these tribes near the coast. Because you especially in the South, you look at the Tuscarora War, you look at some of these wars going on in Georgia and Florida, you start seeing the Yamasee and Cherokee there. And so, they were tributaries to some of the folks in these colonies. They were allowed to turn against their cousins and so forth. And then they end up, after the people get those lands and divvy them up, they go after them.
Yep. Because that's why you don't see the Cherokee until you start coming into the mid 1800s and stuff.
Right.
Because
you can tell that
because the Cherokee was a member of the Confederation of Indians and certain colonists that sided with each other.
Right. And everybody's looking at them like it's a single tribe. But how do you have a single tribe that massive without, them absorbing a bunch of smaller tribes that had their own identity, amalgamating them? And this is why a lot of us who have heard about being Indians from our grandmothers and great grandmothers, they usually cite being Cherokee. Because by the time the elders were born, they had all amalgamated into that.
Yeah, the 1800s. The 1800s is when you get the rise of the Cherokee.
Right.
Because that's the thing I was telling people. If you study in history, you don't find no mention of the Cherokee in the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s.
No, not in practice. I mean, because you look at it this way, we supposed to believe on one hand we had a delegation of Cherokee that was going to Great Britain, signing these treaties with them. Yet at the same time, the people they encountered were the Powhatans in Virginia. So how that's supposed to work?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's just like the Seminoles. The Seminoles is a mix of different tribes and bands.
Right.
Part of them being Yamasee, some of them being Miccosukee. Because a lot of people don't even know about them, the Miccosukee tribes in Florida.
Yeah, and that was another thing that me and TMH was talking about, because he was going through a book that was showing a whole bunch of tribes that existed between 1580 and 1880. He said,
"Yeah,
I mean, long list. It's in one of the back chats. He
Like we were going back on it. Yeah, me and him been digging up stuff, posting it, going back and forth.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm starting to wonder where the Tuscarora called something else too, back far enough, because you don't really see much mention of them until the late 1600s. And part of it might have been because the British hadn't encountered them, because I like part of the family tree that I put together is the Scotch Irish part. That's the Jenkins part, and they started here in 1688. but they started in what's now Suffolk in Nansemond, and they bought a tract of land up in, I want to say it was 1735, and that was the document that I found when we went down there last time. So in 1735, they bought land down in that area in what's now Berkeley County, North Carolina, and that was where they came into contact with what they call the Tuscarora. But I mean, those people could have called themselves something else even further back, you know. And I was telling TMH that they called them Tuscarora because that was how they anglicized what they call themselves. Because they just call themselves the hemp gatherers or Scout-Ure, and that they anglicized it to Tuscarora, right? So, I mean, those people, and so when those people encountered the colonists, they call them, what do they call them? I think Uchiren, right? Uchiren were the cotton growers, and they would call them the cotton growers because they were the ones that used cotton for their clothes. So the Tuscarora used Indian hemp for their clothes. So they saw that the colonists came there, and they weave cotton clothes, and so they call them the cotton growers, the cotton pickers. we was laughing about that because it's like the cotton pickers used to be the word for the pale face, and somehow it got flipped, like everything else got flipped, and now we cotton pickers. So,
yeah, and you hit it right on the head. We wasn't using cotton for clothing. America's main textile at that time was hemp.
Right. Indian hemp, milkweed, so forth.
Yeah, hemp was before any cotton and sugar plantations. It was hemp first.
Yeah, and look how as they came into power, they replaced it. It was like, well, we're gonna use cotton instead, and we're gonna villainize hemp, and so that way nobody's using it. Nobody can grow it. Nobody's using it because they ain't doing nothing but smoking it anyway. So,
and the funny thing about it, you can see how the three nations rose to power by having their hands on resources here. See, when Spain rose to its dominance, they had their hands on resources from here. The push of the French Revolution, if you actually look at it, was because they were here. They were taking resources from here back to France, like to this day. The birth of the English Revolution, when they took their rise to power, was because all the best resources are here now and go well.
Over there to enrich all of them. And that's another thing, like when we went to London a couple years back, I mean, you see all this splendor, all of these riches that are, that are not only at like, the monarch palace, but also, in some of these palaces and castles and stuff for these noble folk. Everybody was getting rich off of the trade and all of the the resources and goods and stuff that came from here. Everybody was making money, and it was great. It was just when these the financing of these wars started to catch up with them, and they needed to figure out ways to essentially exploit people to get more money or to get more resources to keep fighting wars. That's when things got stupid.
Yeah, because they realized by war they didn't have to really give up too much. They can fight.
Right.
The winning side didn't matter, and that's the one thing I started looking at. It didn't matter what side won any of the Indian wars because they were all entrenched. The Europeans were entrenched with each other anyway.
Right. Because even if they won a battle against us, they got to watch out for each other. I mean, look at how in New Amsterdam they were constantly, pirating Spanish ships, but on the lookout for the British. The British ended up overtaking them, even though most of their resources came from the Spanish.
Hello?
When you go down further, like near here in Jamestown, the British come in, they pirated in the Spanish, taking their resources, but they worried about the Portuguese and stuff coming in and fighting them back. So everybody's worried about everybody else.
But they bought you for it. Call your mom, they're calling me. All right.
I'm not gonna do your work. No, I'm not gonna do your work. Not dog 17 right here.
And then the moment he went to visit his wife in hospital, only to see her lose her fight for life. Police have believed this victim of the suicide bomber in the moments before he murdered.
I'm gonna go answer a call real quick.
Okay, man.
CCTV has also emerged of the two men who were targeted to the black others given the power of those trying to escape. Following the discovery of more unexploded devices and claims that those responsible were connected to ISIS, the government warned the Sri Lankan people that there could be more attacks. There was a heavy security presence in Colombo, and they began to bury their dead. This town is known as Little Rome because it is the center of the Catholic community in Sri Lanka. But on this day of mourning, people of all faiths show their solidarity and share their
No, not that one.
in an empty still
Hello?
threat. So many families
Yeah.
are having to deal with the trauma of seeing their loved ones to rest.
She said she was trying to see what they had given her remote.
What y'all did with the remote? Where you put the remote?
I put it on the table like when I saw it. I just touched it no time after that. And she put it on the table. And then I went outside.
They gonna get on. Everybody get on. This one gonna look like
I really didn't take it ready. The second ready is one.
I'm gonna take this everything.
But thank you, and bro, go Let me see.
Yeah. Hootie, where you put that remote, Sunday? Don't hug me.
Yes, sir.
Where did you put the remote Sunday. Stop, LJ.
I put in the last time I remember seeing it, I put it on the table after I got finished turning it. Then so that the week off we would keep for me. Okay, put on TV your table. You can. Yeah, well, Auntie said she got mom put up some phone, so she put on the movie Netflix. So I left on the key.
Honey, you seen the remote? What? Junior. Oh, they all keep saying on the table, but it ain't on the table.
Oh, but I'm the only one who touched it. And I don't remember only putting it on the table nowhere else. I'm the only one who touched that remote.
And the distributor itself have been charged with drug trafficking.
The ready after I got pinned to the I put that on the table.
That includes executives who are legally distributed drugs from their employees.
Now at 75, you could get 10 years in prison if you